Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Truck Talk with Liz. This is your host, Liz Behaven, and for those of you who are new here, this is my show where I drive a truck. I drive a lot. And while I do, I talk, hence the name. I talk about, well, all sorts of things. It's a chance to slow down, to watch the world go by from a few feet up, and to just think together for a little while. Today, we've got a long haul ahead of us. 3 of them, in fact. 3 different jobs, 3 different rigs, a whole lot of road. As always, the day starts with a message from the man himself, David. He's my boss, I guess, though boss feels like such a strange word for what he is. He's more like a cryptic dispatcher at the edge of the world. Let's see what he's sent through this morning.
A sun-squeezed memory in a tanker, rolling west where the mountains bite the sky. The dentist's wife on the radio again. A beautiful house, a beautiful wife, and a beautiful knife. Keep the shiny side up, little bird. This for all the lonely people, thinking that life has passed them by. 10-4.
A sun-squeezed memory in a tanker. Lemonade. We're hauling lemonade from St. Louis, Missouri, all the way to Ketchum, Idaho. And he's right. It is for all the lonely people. Or at least, it is for this one. This Western Star feels good, solid, a good companion for the first leg. Alright, let's get the show on the road. So, as we pull out of St. Louis, we leave behind a city with a very deep and complicated history. We call it the Gateway to the West, which is such a sanitized way of framing it. A gateway for whom? For settlers, for capital, for an empire expanding over land that was already home. Long before the arch was ever a blueprint, this was a center of the world of the Mississippian culture. Cahokia, just across the river, was a city larger than London was at the time, a place of immense complexity, social organization, art, all built by people working together, and we built a highway through the middle of it. It's a story you see over and over. What was here before is paved over, forgotten, or turned into a tourist attraction with a little plaque, but the land, it remembers. The idea of what was here before, of how people organized themselves before they were forced into the systems we have now, it's been on my mind a lot lately. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and they said something you hear all the time, something that's just taken as a given. They said, well, it's just human nature, isn't it? People are naturally competitive. And I just sat there for a little while, because in the society we live in, especially here in the so-called West, competition is so deeply ingrained in everything we do that it feels like breathing. It feels natural. It's no wonder we consider it to be the default mode of how people relate to one another. From the time we're in school, we're sorted and ranked, taught that to be worthy we have to be better than the person sitting next to us, get the highest score, be picked first for the team, get into the best college, and you get a job, and it's the same thing. Corporations, the big ones that David probably gets our contracts from, they just lay people off all the time, taking away their ability to feed their families, to see a doctor, all in the name of staying competitive. It's this abstract god we're all supposed to sacrifice to. But it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. This hyper-competitive industrial capitalist model is just one way humans have figured out how to live together, out of thousands upon thousands of ways across all of history. And with any luck, it will not be the last. It's obvious that humans are capable of competitive behavior. You see it every day. But it's just as obvious, if you look, how much our society actively encourages it rewards it and at the same time suppresses our instinct to cooperate, to help, and to engage in mutual aid. There's the sunrise. Always feels like a little promise, doesn't it? A fresh new start. No matter what happened yesterday, the sun always comes up. There have been countless societies all over the world that have developed these incredible, deeply cooperative ways of living, ways that are just so alien to the norms we are forced to live under. Now, it's true that most of these societies have been swallowed up by the global capitalist system, through colonialism, through slavery, through war, through the deliberate destruction of the environments they depended on. It's a brutal and heartbreaking story, but accounts of them remain. They're like the little stars you see right next to the sun during a sunrise, showing us that there are so many other worlds, so many other ways of being that are possible. Our first checkpoint. The friendly folks at the Department of Transportation want to make sure that our lemonade isn't, I don't know, too heavy? Too subversive? Let's see what they have to say. This part is always a little tense, you know. You do everything by the book, but there's always that feeling of being scrutinized by an authority you have no real say in. The illusion of control. But it says here 73,195 pounds. No problem. They're satisfied. We're officially a non-threatening shipment of sugary water back on the road. Now, where was I? Oh, right. Different ways of being. You know, lately I've been reading a lot about the Mbuti people who live in the Ituri forest in Central Africa. For as long as anyone can tell, they've lived in a stateless society, a society without government. There are accounts from ancient historians that suggest they were living as hunter-gatherers just as they do now, back in the time of the Egyptian pharaohs. And if you ask the Mbuti, they'll tell you they've always been this way. Now, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking of people like the Mbuti as, I don't know, primitive or isolated. That's the story we're usually told. But it's not true. They've had frequent, complex interactions with the Bantu peoples who live in villages around the forest for centuries. They've had plenty of opportunities to see what so-called advanced societies look like. They've developed these intricate relationships of exchange and gift-giving with their farming neighbors, but they've always held onto their own identity and their own way of life. They call themselves the children of the forest. passing through St. Joseph. This was the starting point of the Pony Express, another one of those romanticized bits of American history. Brave men on fast horses taming the Wild West, but what it really was a tightening grip of communication for an expanding state, a way for the central government and eastern capital to exert control, to move information faster, to make the process of colonization more efficient. Every telegraph line, every railroad track, every highway like this one is laid over another story. And there we go, crossing into Kansas, leaving Missouri behind. The landscape is already starting to open up. It's vast out here. Makes you feel small, in a good way. Marysville, Kansas, another historic trail town. You see these little towns all over the old pioneer routes. It's a landscape scarred with the memory of that expansion. The sheer will it took, but also the sheer violence, the displacement of the Kaw, the Pawnee, the Osage peoples who called this place home for millennia. We talk about the pioneers' hardship, and it was real, but we so rarely talk about the hardship they created in their wake. Hello, Nebraska. We'll be in your good life for a little while. The road stretches out. This is where the world gets really, really big and flat. and there's Lincoln ahead, the state capital. You can always tell a capital city. There's a certain kind of architecture, a certain weight to it. Grand, solid buildings designed to look permanent, eternal. They're monuments to the idea of the state itself. They're built to awe you, to make you feel like the power they represent is natural and unshakable. But it's not. It's just a story we tell ourselves, a set of agreements, and like any story, it has an ending. The story of the Mbuti people is being tragically rewritten right now. Not by them, but for them. Today, there are still several thousand Mbuti people living in the Turi forest, trying to navigate this changing world, fighting to preserve their way of life. But it's a hard fight. There's a mineral called coltan, which is essential for making our cell phones, our laptops, the device you're probably watching this on right now. It's a chief financial incentive for the civil war that has been ravaging that entire region, killing hundreds of thousands of people. The governments of Congo, Rwanda, Uganda, they all want to control this billion-dollar industry that primarily exists to feed our insatiable hunger for new electronics in the US and Europe. And so, miners, desperate for work, come from all over Africa and set up camps. This leads to massive deforestation, a huge population boom, and an increase in hunting for bushmeat to feed all these soldiers and miners. The wildlife is being depleted, and so, lacking food and fighting for territory, the soldiers and miners have started carrying out these unspeakable atrocities against the Mbuti, who they see as standing in their way. Some Mbuti are now trying to get an international tribunal to recognize these horrors, including cannibalism, as crimes against them. It is a genocide funded by our demand for shiny new gadgets. Looks like this western star is getting thirsty. We'll need to find a spot to fuel up soon. The sun is starting to get low in the sky too. This part of the day is always beautiful. The golden hour. Everything looks so soft and warm. Again? They are very, very interested in this lemonade. Okay, let's go say hello. Huh. 72,445. That's less than before. About 750 pounds less. Did we leak? No. All the gauges are fine. Maybe the scales are calibrated differently. That must be it. Weird. North Platte, Nebraska, a city built by the railroad, Union Pacific. You can't talk about the railroads without talking about the labor that built them, the immense, back-breaking, often lethal work done by thousands of Chinese and Irish immigrants, by freed slaves, by anyone desperate enough to take the punishing work. And you cannot talk about that labor without talking about the struggle for unions, for basic dignity, for a share of the immense wealth they were creating for a handful of robber barons. The history of the West is the history of labor struggle, and the history of the violent suppression of that struggle by the state and private armies. Alright, all filled up. That came up to, wow, $689. Good thing David's paying. A little notification just popped up on my phone. Payment from D, accepted. He's a mystery, that man. Never a word, just riddles and money appearing out of the ether. I wonder what he looks like. I wonder if he even exists outside of this little app on my phone. here comes the night, my favorite time to drive. The world shrinks down to just this little bubble of light. It's peaceful. The radio's quieter, the chatter of the world fades away. It's just you, the engine, and the road. This is usually when I put on some music. On these long, dark stretches, you need a good soundtrack. I've had this one album on just about constant repeat for the last few weeks. It's a classic from 1995, Mobb Deep's The Infamous. If you don't know about it, well, it's just one of the most beloved rap albums of the 90s, and for good reason. It hasn't lost its luster at all. In fact, I'd argue its cultural capital has only grown. There was this list, I don't remember the name of it, but it went viral years ago. The best rap beats of all time, and Shook Ones Part 2 was number 1. And you know how the internet is, everyone's always at each other's throats, but with this, there wasn't a lot of disagreement. It's just a fact. And I think a big part of why it still feels so current to this day is that you can feel its ripple effects in so much of the low-key, textured, abstract hip-hop that's happening in the underground. I feel like fans of someone like Earl Sweatshirt could instantly connect with how steady and effortless Prodigy and Havoc's flows are, and fans of Griselda would go wild for the lyrical content and the eerie production. I feel like it's interesting when you think about how small changes can make all the difference. The first album, Juvenile Hell, well, it's not bad, but it's a world away from this. On that first record, they sound so young and so angry. Havoc's on the cover holding a scythe like it's a black metal promo pic. But by the time they got to The Infamous, everything is way more methodical. They sound so cold-blooded, so desensitized to the violent world they're rapping about. It's not the over-the-top chaos of a lot of hardcore hip-hop at the time, but it's this unflinching, almost quiet response to the horror. And the beats are just a beautiful, entrancing vibe. They sound like a big Timberland boot and big winter jackets in New York City when it's below freezing and you can see your breath. The sequencing of the album is just perfect. It's a journey. From the opener, the start of your ending, through Survival of the Fittest, where Prodigy first mentions the idea of halfway crooks, setting up the theme for Shook Ones later on. It's so holistic. You have got to be kidding me. Okay, one more time for the people in the back. Now, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, the features are incredible too. You've got Nas, Q-Tip, Ghostface, Raekwon. It's like a perfect balance of the entire New York City hip-hop spectrum of the time. It's thoughtful and contemplative like the best jazz rap, but the world they're painting is an underground world of drug deals, shootouts. But it's not loud, it's cerebral. The instrumentals are full of space and creepy tones. It's cinematic. If you haven't listened to it or haven't in a while, do yourself a favor. I'll link Survival of the Fittest and Temperatures Rising in the description. Temperatures Rising is just this incredible track, structured as letters to a friend who had to skip town after a crime. It's so thoughtful, so human in the middle of all this grit. It's a masterpiece. Okay, what is this monkey business? 73,678. That's heavier than when we started. The lemonade is multiplying. Is this miracle lemonade? Is David hauling something else entirely? I'm just confused. And a little intrigued. What are we really carrying, I wonder? into Wyoming. It's just darkness out here. A whole lot of beautiful nothing. But also Cheyenne, another city that owes its existence to the railroad and the cattle industry. This is the heart of cowboy country, which is another one of those mythologies built on a very complicated reality. The Johnson County War happened not too far from here. It was basically a class war, where the wealthy cattle barons, with their help of hired guns and political allies, tried to wipe out smaller homesteaders and settlers who they accused of rustling. It's the story of capital trying to crush anyone who gets in the way of its accumulation. Passing Rock Springs. There was a massacre here in 1885. White coal miners, feeling their jobs and wages were threatened by the Union Pacific Coal Company hiring Chinese miners for less pay, rioted. They attacked the Chinese community, murdering at least 28 people and driving hundreds out of town. It's a horrific story, and it's a story of how capital pits workers against each other. The company created the conditions, stoked the resentment, and it was immigrant workers who paid the price with their lives. The enemy was not their fellow miner, but rather it was the boss getting rich off their division. And hello, Utah. Just a little slice of you tonight. Of course, welcome to Utah. Please step on the scale. $73,333. The numbers are all over the place. I've given up on trying to understand. This is David's strange, fluctuating lemonade, and I am merely its humble chauffeur. Ogden, Utah. This is where the two ends of the first transcontinental railroad met. A monumental achievement of engineering, they say. And it was. But it was built on the backs of exploited labor and on the dispossession of the Shoshone, Ute, and Paiute peoples. This whole landscape is a monument to that contradiction. Progress for some, and devastation for others. One last time, for old time's sake. Right in the middle of the other readings, sure, why not? At this point, the numbers just feel like poetry, like one of David's messages. There's that dawn again. We made it through the night. That damn good coffee in my thermos is long gone, but seeing the sky start to lighten up is its own kind of energy. It's a good time to think, and a good time to talk about books. In the last episode, I mentioned I was going to start reading Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend. Well, I did. I read the first big chunk, the prologue and the section called Childhood, and I have to say, I'm hooked. The book club is officially in session. If you didn't get the chance to read the book and are interested in reading it, you can skip to the timestamp that's on your screen right now, so you can avoid any spoilers. I'm gonna give you a warning countdown, and then I'll immediately go into spoilers. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh my god, halfway through Leela's wedding, just as Elena is reflecting on the crushing weight of social class and gender roles, the narrator suddenly reveals that the entire neighborhood is actually a top-secret experimental simulation being run inside a malfunctioning shoe designed by Leela's father, and the girls must now decide whether to keep living inside the shoe universe or escape into the real 1960s, where everyone is inexplicably fluent in French and drives pink submarines through the street of Naples. I warned you that I was gonna go into heavy spoilers and you didn't believe me. You get what you paid for. Just kidding, none of that happens in the book. I just want to see how good you are at following advice. Now go read the book. You've got no excuse. Anyways, on to my real thoughts. Reading this book made me feel like I've stepped into this neighborhood in Naples that is so vividly real, but also has this dreamlike quality. The writing is strange. It seems so plain and simple on the surface, but then a sentence will just snag on you, and it pulls you down into something so much denser and sharper. I think that's what's so absorbing about it. You don't see the point of the entry until you're already inside the wound. What's really staying with me is the feeling of pervasive violence, and not just the physical kind, though there is plenty of that. The beatings, the sudden cruelty that feels like the default setting for all of the adults. It's an emotional, a social, a structural violence that just hums under everything. It's in the way that the neighborhood treats people like the mad Melina or the feared Don Achille. It's in how quickly a moment of childhood innocence, two girls losing their dolls, becomes this dark, menacing myth. There's a line where the narrator, Lenore, compares people to balloons, expanding with rage until they burst. And that felt so real. It's what happens when people are given no other outlet, no other way to exist. Not that I'm anywhere near reaching my bursting point myself, but here we go again. By the way, we're in Idaho, so I guess you couldn't be left out, Idaho, could you? You saw everyone else doing it, and you just had to join in. Alright, let's dance. $73,127, close to where we started. I'm done questioning it. It is what it is. The lemonade speaks for itself. Anyways, we're in Idaho now, on the home stretch, final state on this delivery. Now what was I saying? Oh yeah, and then there's Leela, and she is ferocious, fascinating, and honestly, a little terrifying. As the reader, you feel just like Lenore. You don't know if you admire her, envy her, or want to run away from her. And this friendship between them is one of the most compelling things I've ever read, because it's not sweet, and it's certainly not wholesome, but it is real. There's this raw, unresolved competition between them, always pulsing just underneath the surface. This one line from Lenore just hit me so hard. She says, quote, "So, I was second in everything. I hoped that no one would ever realize it." End quote. That feeling of being eclipsed by someone you love, of being both drawn to them and dwarfed by them, is such a painful human thing. I'm still wrestling with the writing itself. Sometimes it feels a little clumsy in English, but I have seen people who can read Italian share the original passages, and you realize how much is just lost in translation. A word that feels awkward in English is sharp and perfect in Italian. It's a strange feeling knowing you're reading a filtered, compromised version of the author's voice. It's disorienteering. But even with that, there's a gravity here that's just pulling me in. The scene where they try to walk to the sea, it's so symbolic, pushing the boundaries of their tiny world, only to get overwhelmed and turning back. The sea is right there, but it's out of reach. That's so much of what childhood feels like, isn't it? That constant, futile push against the world you've been given. I don't know if I love it yet, but I'm definitely listening, and it has my full attention. For the next episode, I'm going to read the first part of the next section, Adolescence, up to chapter 16. That takes us up to about page 153. If you're reading along, that's our goal. I can't wait to see where it goes. We're getting close to Ketchum. This is Sun Valley, famous resort town, a playground for the wealthy. It's beautiful country, but this land belongs to the Shoshone Bannock peoples. The story of this place isn't just about ski lifts and celebrity homes. It's about a people who have lived in harmony with this land for generations and who are still here, still fighting for their sovereignty and their way of life. And we're here, one delivery down. That was a long one. Time to see what David has in store for us next. Alright, new truck, new cargo. This Peterbilt is a classic. A whole different feel from the Western Star. More regal, somehow. Let's see what the man has to say about this load.
Steel horses for the modern cowboy, empty shells waiting for a soul, a different kind of horsepower for a different kind of dream. You know, for the first time in my life, I'm sorry. I did it from Ketchum to Socorro. Don't be a hero, kid. 10-4.
Steel horses for the modern cowboy. Pickups from Ketchum, Idaho, down to Socorro, New Mexico. Another long one. He's in a philosophical mood today. Alright, Socorro, here we come. So, back to the Mbuti people, and this idea of cooperation over competition. It's woven into the very fabric of their society. In his book, The Forest People, an anthropologist named Colin Turnbull, who was one of the first Westerners to live with them in the forest, described how resolutely egalitarian they were. So many of their customs were designed specifically to reduce competition and promote cooperation. Gathering food was a community affair. When they hunted with nets, the whole band would turn out. One group would act as beaters, walking through the forest, making noise, flushing animals out. The other group would wait with the nets. A successful hunt wasn't about one great hunter, it was the result of everyone working together and the whole community shared in the catch. There was no hoarding, no individual accumulation of wealth. The forest provided for everyone, so everyone shared what the forest gave. Even their children's games were about teaching cooperation. Turnbull describes this game where a group of small kids would climb a young, flexible sapling. Their combined weight would bend the tree over until its top touched the ground. Then, the goal was for everyone to let go at the exact same time. If they did it right, the tree would spring back upright. But if one kid let go too early or too late, they'd get flung into the air. It's a game that teaches group harmony, being in sync with each other over individual performance. Think about the games we teach our kids. War games. Games with one winner and a field of losers. It's a different kind of socialization, isn't it? Idaho, right next to the Fort Hall Reservation, home of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. It's so important to remember that these aren't just historical facts. These are sovereign nations that exist today within the borders of the United States. They have their own governments, their own cultures, their own struggles and triumphs. They've survived so much, and the resilience is a powerful thing to witness. Hello again, Utah. Let's see if you are as interested in our pickup trucks as you were in our magic lemonade. Well, that's a freebie. I guess they don't care about steel horses. Or maybe David put in a good word for us. Either way, I'll take it. Provo, home of BYU. It's interesting to think about tight-knit communities like the one here. On the one hand, they can provide this incredible sense of belonging, of mutual support or cooperation. But that same cohesiveness can also be used to enforce conformity, to exclude those who are different, who don't fit the mold. Community is a powerful tool. It can be used for liberation, or it can be used for control. It all depends on who's wielding it and why. I'm starting to like this Peterbilt. It's got good luck. Price, a coal mining town. This region has a deep history of labor activism. The story of Joe Hill, the union organizer and songwriter for the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, ended not far from here, in Salt Lake City. He was executed by the state on a trumped-up murder charge, but everyone knew it was because he was an effective organizer. His last words were, "Don't mourn, organize." 100 years later, that's still some of the best advice anyone's ever given. And here is Moab. This place is just stunningly beautiful. The red rocks, the arches, but this beauty hides a difficult history. This was the center for uranium mining during the Cold War. The rush for uranium to build nuclear weapons left a toxic legacy that the land and the people, particularly many Navajo miners, are still dealing with today. It's that same old story. A national project, a patriotic duty that ends up being a death sentence for the people on the front lines and a poisoned inheritance for generations to come. Another fill-up, $621 this time, and right on cue, here's the notification. Thanks, David, you mysterious benefactor. Nightfall in the desert. There's nothing quite like it. Mexico, the land of enchantment. It truly is. The high desert has a magic to it. And now we're heading deep into the southwest. Now, another thing that I found interesting while reading about the Mbuti was how they worked to undermine competition between genders. They didn't use gender pronouns or familial words like son or sister. They would say child or sibling. The only exception was for parents, where there's a functional difference between the one who gives birth and the one who doesn't. As a trans woman, that just resonates with me. The idea that gender can be seen as a functional description or even as a playful role, rather than this rigid biological cage they try to put us in. Turnbull described this ritual game they played to undermine gender competition. It started like a tug of war, men on one side of a long vine, women on the other. But as soon as one side started to win, people from the winning team would run over to the losing side, symbolically changing their gender and joining the other team. This would go back and forth until everyone had switched sides multiple times, and the whole thing would collapse in a heap of laughter. Neither side won, but that was the point. Restoring harmony was the goal. It wasn't victory. Conflict, or noise as they call it, was seen as a problem for the whole community, a threat to that harmony. If a dispute couldn't be resolved, the whole band would gather. If that didn't work, the youth, who often acted as the justice seekers, would start rampaging through the camp, blowing a horn that sounded like an angry elephant, symbolizing how the conflict threatened everyone. They might even kick out fires or knock down huts to show how serious it was. And all the while the adults would sing together, building a sense of cooperation and togetherness until the issue was resolved. But maybe the most important lesson from the Mbuti isn't just that a cooperative free society is possible, it's that free societies are not possible as long as government and corporations are actively trying to crush any pocket of independence. It doesn't matter how perfect our internal harmony is when an outside force is funding genocide to make cell phones. Our solidarity cannot stop at the boundaries of our own communities. It has to be global. It has to be a fight for everyone who is oppressed, and a fight against the systems that oppress them. Farmington. We're very close to the Navajo Nation here, the Diné, as their real name is, the largest reservation in the United States, a nation within a nation. Their history is one of incredible resilience in the face of centuries of colonial violence, forced relocation, and the exploitation of their land for resources like coal, oil, and uranium. And still, their culture, their language, their connection to the land endures. Their struggle for sovereignty, for clean water, for justice is one of the most important happening in this country today. This idea that our ability to cooperate is somehow lost, that it only exists in these far-off places, it's just not true. It's in us. It's a possibility for all of us right now. And you see it most clearly when the systems we rely on collapse. 20 years ago, In one of the most individualistic and competitive societies in history, state authority just evaporated in one city. And in that moment of catastrophe, with hundreds of people dying and resources stretched thin, strangers came together. They helped each other. They engaged in a spirit of what you could call mutual aid. The city was New Orleans, after Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. Initially, the corporate media, they were all spreading these racist stories about savagery and looting, with heroic police and National Guard troops fighting off these imagined gangs. Fox News, CNN, and the New York Times all falsely reported murders and roving gangs of rapists in the Superdome, where refugees gathered during the storm. But it was later admitted that those stories were almost entirely false. The vast majority of rescues, the vast majority, were carried out not by professionals, but by ordinary New Orleans residents in their own small boats, often in direct defiance of the authorities who were trying to stop them. Meanwhile, what were the police doing? They were murdering people who were trying to get drinking water, diapers, and basic supplies from abandoned grocery stores. Supplies that were just going to be thrown away anyway because they were contaminated by flood water. The police weren't protecting people, they were protecting property. They were protecting the profits of corporations over the lives of human beings. That's their function. In a crisis, you see what the state truly is, and you also see what people truly are. When the chips are down, people help each other. And if you believe that this is a radical idea, that this is something that only anarchists or subversives would talk about, I'm going to quote Fred Rogers. Quote, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" End quote. Just took a left turn at Albuquerque, a city at a crossroads for centuries. The Rio Grande, the Camino Real, Route 66, so many layers of history here. Indigenous, Spanish, Mexican, American, all living on top of each other, sometimes in harmony, often in conflict. Socorro, New Mexico. Just a few miles from here is the Trinity site, the place where the first atom bomb was detonated. the ultimate expression of state power and violence, the beginning of a new and terrifying age. It's a heavy place, a place to reflect on what we're capable of, for good and for ill. And that's 2. The steel horses have been delivered. Time for the last leg of the journey. One more truck to go. Alright, final truck of the day, a Mac anthem, and her final delivery. This one feels like a workhorse. No frills, just business. From Socorro, New Mexico, all the way down to the border to Laredo, Texas. Let's see what David's final piece of poetry is for the day.
Canned wind on a thirsty border, a mechanical lung for a concrete desert. I was a fool to think that you would do the same for me. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to break down and cry. 10-4.
David, I hope you're okay, man. Canned wind. An air compressor. I guess that makes sense. Let's get this lung to Laredo. So, we've been talking all day about this idea of competition versus cooperation, about the Mbuti, about what happens in disasters. If this is something that interests you, if you want to explore these ideas further, there are some really incredible books out there. The writers have thought about this stuff way more deeply than I can in one truck drive. I'd recommend The Semi, A Non-Violent People of Malaya by Robert Denton. Another one would be Society Against the State by Pierre Clastres. He was an anthropologist who argued that many indigenous societies weren't just stateless by accident, they were actively organized to prevent the state from ever forming. It's fascinating. Leslie Feinberg's Transgender Warriors is essential, connecting the history of trans and gender non-conforming people with broader struggles against power. And David Graeber's Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology is just brilliant for imagining what a society based on these principles could look like. I'll put a list in the description. Reading is one of the best tools we have for imagining different worlds. Roswell, famous for one thing and one thing only, the UFO crash, which, of course, was just a military weather balloon. But the myth is more interesting, isn't it? A story of visitors from another world. But the reality is that Roswell has always been a military town, part of the vast military-industrial complex that stretches across this desert. The stories we tell are often a way to distract from the more mundane, but far more impactful reality of state power. This is oil country. Though not visible from here, there are pump jacks all over the landscape, nodding up and down like mechanical birds. These towns live and die by the price of oil, the boom and bust cycle of extractive industries. It brings wealth for a few and precarious, dangerous jobs for the many, and it leaves scars on the land that will last for generations. And there it is, the final state. Welcome to Texas. It's a long drive to Laredo from here. Fort Stockton, named for a military fort, like so many towns out here. It was a post for the Buffalo Soldiers after the Civil War, the Black Cavalry and infantry regiments. It's such a complex, painful part of history. Black men who had just fought for their own freedom, sent out west to be the arm of the state in the subjugation of native peoples. It makes me think about how systems of power can turn the oppressed against each other to serve their own ends. Del Rio, a border town. We're getting close now. The whole nature of the drive is about to change. Driving towards an international border always feels heavy. You can feel the presence of the state so much more intensely. The checkpoints, the patrols. This line on a map, this border, it's a political construct, a violent one. It doesn't exist in nature, but it has life and death consequences for people who are just trying to find safety or a better life for their families. We see fences and walls and armed guards, and we're told it's for our security. But what it really is a mechanism to control the movement of labor, to keep people desperate and exploitable. It's a brutal, inhumane system. From Palestine to the US-Mexico border, the fight for a world without walls, without checkpoints, without cages is the same fight. Laredo, the end of the line, one of the biggest ports of entry into the US. So much of what we buy in our stores passes through here. It's a city built on the North American Free Trade Agreement, now called the Agreement between the United States of America, the United Mexican States, and Canada. So-called free trade. But it's only ever free for capital, for corporations to move their factories across the border to pay poverty wages and avoid environmental regulations. For the workers, for the people, it's anything but free. Made it. Laredo. The lemonade, the pickups, the air compressor, all delivered. That was a journey. Thank you so much for riding along with me. So, 3 trucks. The Western Star 49X, the Peterbilt 389, and this Mack Anthem. They all have their own personality, their own feel. I've been saving up, thinking about buying my own rig. Being my own, well, not boss, that's a loaded word, but you know what I mean. Having a little more autonomy in my life. So I'm curious what you all think. Which one did you like the most? The modern workhorse Western Star? The classic Peterbilt? Or this rugged Mack? Let me know in the comments. It'd be nice to have your input while I dream. You know, this is all part of the YouTube engagement game. I ask you a question, you write your answer in the comments, and that makes the video more visible to other people. The next step being me asking you to like this video, to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, but I don't give a shit. I just like the comments. Alright, that's all for me for now. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, keep your wheels turning and your thoughts free. Resources for stuff that I talked about in this video are linked in the description below. Anyways, take care of each other. Bye for now.